Hi, folks. Can everyone hear me? All good? Okay, let's get going. This is a beautiful sunny day. My name is Rebecca Cahoe. I'm with Memorial's Office of Public Engagement. I'm here at the Amera Innovation Exchange at Signal Hill campus in St. John's, and I'm so glad that you're joining us today. We acknowledge that the lands on which Memorial University's campuses are situated are in the traditional territories of diverse Indigenous groups. And we acknowledge with respect the histories and cultures of the Beothuk, Mi'kmaq, Innu, and Inuit of this province. We encourage everyone to reflect on these lands from where you are located and the Indigenous people for whom these lands are traditional territory. We're looking forward to discussing the long history of rural public engagement at Memorial and what we hope is a bright future as well. Before we get going, I just want to note that we're offering live closed captioning for this session. And although I know that we in Newfoundland and Labrador are known as quick talkers, if possible, do try to pause between thoughts so that our captioner is able to keep up. Additionally, we are streaming live to Facebook. But be aware that your image and your face will only appear on screen if you talk. We won't be showing all the names of the participants and the attendees. And with that, I'd like to introduce you to our host for this event, Dr. Kelly Vodden. She's a longtime rural scholar, AVP Grenfell campus, research and graduate studies, and a professor with the Environmental Policy Institute. So with that, take it away, Kelly.
Thanks so much, Rebecca, and thanks to everyone at the Office of Public Engagement for organizing this event on a very important topic and one that's near and dear to my heart. And Memorial certainly is having many discussions about its role in our province and including importantly, rural and remote Newfoundland and Labrador. And we continue to strive to reach out and maximize our impact across the province. So I'm really looking forward to hearing what our panelists have to say about what we're doing now to reach those goals and what we might do in the future. We're going to start out by welcoming today's panelists who come from various units within the university as well as our community partners, many of whom I've had the pleasure to work with before and others I hope to in future. We'd like to ask the panelists to introduce themselves briefly, and I'll go through one by one and ask you to do so. But Kelly also will put in the chat the more detailed bios that people have provided for us. So thanks in advance, Kelly, for that. Sheila, I see you first on my screen, so maybe you could start out.
Sure, happy to. Good morning, everyone. I'm Sheila Downer. I work with Memorial. I work with the Harris Center and the Office of Public Engagement, and I'm based.
Great, thank you. And Andrew, I have you next.
All right, thanks very much, everyone, for being here. This is great, and thanks, Dr. Bowden. So I'm Dr. Andrew Hunt. I'm a family doctor practicing in my hometown of Twillingate. I've been here for the past 10 years. I'm a graduate of Memorial University's MD and Family Medicine residency programs, and I'm currently the Assistant Dean of Distributed Medical Education with Memorial's Faculty of Medicine. And I also hold leadership roles with Central Health Regional Health Authority as the Department Chief of Family Medicine, and was the Rural Chief of Staff and Vice President of Medical Services with Central Health in the past as well. So in addition, I'm also the chair of the Newfoundland Labrador Committee of the Society of Rural Physicians of Canada. So as you can see, I have a deep engagement and interest in the rural elements of this province that make it so great. So happy to be here. Thank you.
Good, thanks so much, Andrew. Boyan.
Good morning. Good to be here. My name is Boyan First. I am manager of knowledge mobilization for the Harris Center at Memorial University, and I'm responsible for most of the center's rural and regional programming. And just for the closed captioning, the name is BOJANFURST.
Great. Thanks, Boyan. Now for some of our community partners. Dietra, I see you on next.
Yes, thank you for having me. My name is Dietra Walsh. I am the Director of Advocacy and Communications with Municipalities, Newfoundland and Labrador. We certainly have a long-standing relationship with the university and with researchers there, so very pleased to be here. I have a background in research and government work and now in this sector. And I am also a graduate of Memorial University. I did my PhD there in sociology. And I grew up in rural Newfoundland in the central area in Lewisport.
Thanks, Dietra. And Joni. We're not hearing you, Joni, maybe.
Okay, sorry about that. Yeah, I'm Joni Cranston and I'm a physiotherapist. I've lived and worked in beautiful Norris Point in beautiful Bombay for over 30 years. And in my spare time, I act as the coordinator for the Bombay Cottage Hospital Heritage Corporation, which owns and operates the old Cottage Hospital in Norris Point, which is a sort of community center with health services carrying on the medical traditions, physio and alternative health services. But we also have hostel accommodations. We have the Voice of Bombay community radio station. We have public library, a variety of services available there. Gardens, kitchens, greenhouses, and we're trying to get a daycare there now, jumping through a few hoops for that, but we'll do it. And I'm starting a new project down the coast in Port au Choix. We're incubating a new social enterprise, which will be the Great Northern Peninsula Community Place, which will be, it's in a heritage building, strong participation and partnerships with town and everything. And it'll have health service, community kitchen, fitness center, and accommodations. So we're expanding our hub model down the coast.
Great. Thanks, Joni. Do we have Kevin on the line yet?
We
Kevin
do.
Anderson. Wonderful.
Hello, everyone.
Kevin,
Can you
go
hear
ahead
me?
and yep. You could just introduce yourself and your connection to Memorial and rural Newfoundland and Labrador. That'd be great.
Sure. Sorry I'm late, everyone. I had a slight technological difficulty. My name is Kevin Anderson. I'm the head of the School of Fisheries at the Fisheries and Marine Institute at Memorial University. My connections to rural Newfoundland, I actually was born and raised in Lanson Meadows on the very tip of the northern peninsula of Newfoundland. I grew up in a fishing family, and fisheries has been a part of my life since a very, very young age. I spent 30 years in Fisheries and Oceans Canada and the last year here at the Memorial University. Good morning, everyone.
Great. Thanks, Kevin. And I don't think I see Chief Lavers on the line yet. I know she's been traveling. So is Chief Lavers on the line? We're hoping Chief Mildred Lavers from the Northern Peninsula Mi'kmaq Band will be joining us and talking a little bit later in the panel. So I'll keep an eye on that for Mildred and give her an opportunity to introduce herself should she join us. And we have thank you very much to all the panelists for introducing yourselves. We obviously have a rich range of experience and also representation from folks who are from and have worked across the province. So that's great. And I know we have a number of people on the line who have a great deal to say about these issues as well. But I think what I'll ask you to do is just introduce yourselves in the chat if you'd like to say a little bit about yourselves. And as I mentioned, some of the bios will be mentioned there as well. We're a bit ahead of schedule, but I think that's okay because we have a packed agenda here this morning. We want to talk about Memorial's engagement in rural communities in the province, past, present, and future. So we have a lot of ground to cover. Memorial and our partners have been working together in rural parts of the province for nearly 100 years. And over that time, many lessons, positive and negative, have been learned. Sheila, we're going to start off with you and ask what role has public engagement played in Memorial's history, and how has our connection to rural places of the province shaped that aspect of the university's work?
Thank you, Kelly. So I'm happy to start off. I guess, although I now work for Memorial, that always hasn't been the case for me, but I've always lived in rural communities, except for a very small stint in St. John's. And I feel very strongly, like all of the panelists have already indicated, feel very strongly about the role of the university with rural communities. And I've always felt that understood, and maybe understood is a too strong of a word. I've always believed that connection to the university has been very, very important. And I've been lucky that I've personally have maintained a relationship with Memorial for a very long time in various roles, whether it was with the Harris Center Advisory Board, whether it was working with researchers one-on-one, certainly with the Labrador Institute, which is now the new School of Arctic and Subarctic Studies. And so I've always maintained a strong relationship in living and working in Southern Labrador. So speaking from the perspective of rural and looking at, the past public engagement activities of Memorial, I think if you ask most people that live in rural parts of this province what has worked from a public engagement perspective at Memorial, certainly MUN Extension, I think, would definitely become part of that conversation. But I think it goes deeper than a particular program or a particular set of activities that's happened at Memorial. I think what's really worked from a public engagement perspective has been the longer term relationships that Memorial's developed at the community level. So instead of, the in and out research activity, or it's been the longer term relationships that have really worked. And I also think looking at Memorial's sort of all in to public engagement in terms of making public engagement part of its mission. So one of the 3 pillars of Memorial is public engagement. And I think that's been, mission critical to the success of the university and being connected to what matters and what impacts the communities of Newfoundland and Labrador.
Great. Thanks, Sheila. Joni, would you like to add to that from your perspective? You have a long history of collaborating with Memorial, including current projects as well, but also a background reaching back to Extension, I believe. Can you tell us a bit about that and some of the lessons you think we've learned about working together between communities and the university over the past?
Okay, thank you. Yes, I am old, so I do have a long history. MUN Extension was on the go when I moved to Newfoundland in 1983, and I got to know about it through field workers. Some of the people I knew were field workers, and so them describing their experience. I didn't get to hear about it from the other side, but we have had a long history at the Old Cottage Hospital with working with Memorial and just in a variety of ways. And I think what Sheila said is really true. It's about building those long-term relationships. And I think that's how I would describe what our relationship at the Cottage Hospital is with Memorial. I think our first experience was with the Cura project, which was between UVic and Memorial. And at the time, I didn't know it was happening in our community, and I didn't know about it until a personal friend of mine was actually working for it, and she told me about it. But once then, I think they realized that, and they shifted and they put a community coordinator in the community. They hired a local person to do that. That really did build the connections. I did work I coordinated a few community meetings for the project, and you could really see how those connections could be built. Unfortunately, then that project was over, and some of the initiatives that had started kind of fell by the wayside, because unless there is that presence there to continue the work, it doesn't happen. I looked at Kelly's beautiful timeline with all the different projects that Memorial has had, and there's incredible work there, but I think the most important thing is to keep it going, to build those long-term relationships. And that happens sort of through personal relationships. Ivan Emke has been coming to the Cottage Hospital since we opened our hostel, whether he was playing music at festivals or bringing groups of students or professors for retreats or experiences. So building those relationships with people keeps people coming back and forth into the community. And it is really important to have them living in the community. We had the advantage of, I used to call him my secret weapon, or shareable data now, because I've had to let him go to another community. But Dr. Brennan Lowry is a PhD who's been living in our community. I met him a few years ago. We organized a conference together, and he actually lived here from January until June. And just having him live in the community meant that everybody on the street knew what a PhD was, what they looked like, and also the community groups that we worked with really got to see the advantage of having these very, very highly intelligent, skilled people living and working in your community, really helping you. He helped us with so many initiatives. You know, he actually did practical work, but then he also got to learn more about us, and that's what's building on the research that he's currently doing. So I think the most important lesson I've learned from the past is the importance of having them actually being there, physically living there, working there, and that's how you really build those rich relationships.
Thanks, Joni. And it's interesting that both of you have emphasized these long-term relationships. I think it really speaks to having people involved right from the student level, because I've certainly been involved in a number of graduate student projects over the years that are really instrumental to, we sort of refer to our students as our legs on the ground or those kinds of terms, and they're critical, but they're only with us for a short period. So obviously the commitment to ongoing relationships goes right from the students to faculty and staff and the institution in order to ensure we have those long-term relationships. So thanks for highlighting that. And also the point about communications, Joni, when you said you didn't know about the project going on, the Cura project in your community, I think that's another challenge we always face, is how do we get the word out about the work that's going on in the community? And certainly we need to rely on our community partners for that, but to make sure people do know about the work being done and the results after, which is something we also hear about, making sure we get back with the results. But so thanks for that. Would any of the other panelists like to pitch in on this discussion about the past and what we've learned, lessons from the past?
It's Kevin. Maybe I'll speak a little bit about the Marine Institute. The Marine Institute, of course, joined Memorial in 1992, but actually dates back to 1964. And today, the Marine Institute is very much about a range of programs, from a one-day micro-credentialing all the way to a PhD. However, today, as in the past, community-based education, very much the core of who we are. Community-based education continues to evolve considerably since the 1960s, but it was perhaps the moratorium, the groundfish moratorium of 1992, that had the most significant impact, of course, on rural Newfoundland and Labrador, but certainly on the training that the Marine Institute provides as well. Basically, the fishery have changed forever. The fishery of today is more valuable, less people are employed, but more technologically dependent. Obviously, it's less labor intensive, which offers opportunities given the demographic environment for the future. But what we've learned from the past is probably a good guide for the future, that the environment, the fishery, and the training needs will always be changing in this context. And I think community-based education will change as well. What we've learned is we need to adapt, we need to adjust, and we need to be innovative. And I think perhaps I would offer something that we may have missed a lot in the past, and something we should be engaged in the future, especially in a fisheries context, is the issue of youth engagement, offering up perspectives and opportunities that's in the fishery that's often been a challenge in the past. The fishery, like other industries, really have a demographic challenge in front of it, and I think there's a role for all of us in promoting youth and in the fishery. Thank you.
Thanks, Kevin. Would anybody else from the panel like to add? Dietra, boy, Emma's going to jump in. Sorry, go ahead.
No, go, Dietra, go ahead.
Okay, I'm busily trying to unmute myself. So this is a good actually segue from your comments, Kevin. I think students are a real huge conduit of engagement, historically and in the present. I have to put my municipal hat on and say the same for municipalities, but you know, I think we have to look at this historical piece, and I know everyone is thinking about this from that very strong political perspective of even the beginning of the university and its purpose, and you know, and I mean that's welded into the framework itself. And so that history of engagement is tied and strong, particularly in the years following Confederation with Canada, you know, as a result of development. The development of infrastructure to support, for better, for worse, I'll say that right now, connectivity, education, and training, as well as the development of municipalities as legal and, you know, somewhat planning entities that would support such infrastructure and the delivery of services, and I'll get to some of those pieces in a little bit. But what I want to talk about in particular, this was a political project to modernize our society and focus on upskilling, uptraining, and in many ways the intellectualizing of the populace. And I know there's a bit of a class perspective in that, but I'm going to get to why that's important in a second. I mean, it's a symbolic place for us as students, and I say that because I grew up. And I would say, Lewisport is it's an interesting community from a class perspective. And I know folks at Memorial have studied that as well. But I grew up very much in a discourse of what the university was for us as a future place of bettering ourselves. And it was like this ideological place to go when you finished high school. So, the children of the 70s, 80s, and 90s, so many of us living in many rural areas of the province, did indeed engage with the university in this way, in that thought process, as a place potentially we might go, or could go, or would go. And many of us, and I wrote, my PhD covered a lot of this, we were forced to leave, and Mike Corbett has written about this in Nova Scotia, but we were also, there was a discourse to leave, and the university was one of those pieces in that discourse. And that's not to say that, we had to go to St. John's or Corner Brook, but, how we saw the university was particularly important, and how we engaged with it, from that historical perspective. So thanks for that. I appreciate the opportunity to chat a little bit about that, and thanks.
Great. Thanks, Dietra. The importance of youth and students in our university and in our relationships is certainly coming out here. Boyan, you were going to add something as well.
Yeah, I just wanted to pick up on something that Kevin said, but I think it's really important. We talked about the past, and I sometimes worry that we like to romanticize that past a bit, and that notion that we need to kind of reinvent what that engagement is today, I think is really important. And I think we have to do a little bit more listening than we did in the past. I'm just coming from an academic conference about small islands, and I sometimes wonder if I brought somebody from Change Islands, if they would care about 80% of what those people are talking about. And I think that's a problem. But I think that we, through a variety of programs now, not just at the Harris Center, but at Marine Institute, at Grenfell, we are really starting to build better relationship, and we are starting to build programming that is really a lot more responsive to the community needs. And I think when it comes to innovation and charting what is that future looking like for Memorial to engage with rural, I think that's really important to keep in mind, that conversation really has to be about engagement. It has to be two-way, and we have to figure out what is that we actually do bring to those communities.
Right. Thanks, Boyan. Your point about romanticizing the past makes me, I want to come back to the extension services that because Sheila raised it at the beginning, and I think we might as well sort of put that out for discussion as well in the remarks that follow. We still have time, so those of you who are on the line will also be able to pitch in. I'm wondering about thoughts from the panelists or others in our ongoing discussion. What do you think the elements of extension services was that people really still, when I travel around rural Newfoundland and Labrador, I don't know if others would say the same, I often hear extension services still come up and reflections on the past. And I wonder what some of the lessons from that are that we can take forward into the future. What were some of the things, is it romanticizing, or what were some of the key elements of that relationship that we might bring forward? Or also the Cura project, Joni, you mentioned Cura. The Cura project I hear a lot as well here on the West Coast, and certainly in the Grossmoor and Northern Peninsula area. So clearly the Cura project, Community University for Resilience and Recovery Alliance, I should know that, I was part of it, worked well. It was a multi-year initiative, and the communities very much appreciated it. So maybe just for the rest of the conversation, that we can try to pull out what were some of the things that really worked well in those kinds of initiatives. Sounds like we have a comment from Cyr. Listening and discernment are the two most important parts of engagement. I don't know if you'd like to say anything to that, to add to your comment in the chat. or anyone else?
Sorry, I'll just pipe in it. Well, a lot of the work that we've done at Memorial in the sciences and in the social sciences really has been really, and you just mentioned Cura, has been about communicating and engaging with communities, rural communities, and in my experience, it's not communication is not just a two-way street. It's the listening is more important, and the discernment of the needs is more important than just saying, look, we have an idea, and this is, what do you think? And so we've had a lot of success, for example, in developing mussel farming, sustainable food production, seafood production in rural Newfoundland through the 1980s, 1990s, and 2000s, where there was a real interest in developing local community support and also engagement in sustainable food production. And I'm happy to say that through our efforts and listening to the communities, a dozen or more communities in rural Newfoundland, there is a sustainable industry now that produces about $20 million worth of value to the community, local communities, and spins the economy in those communities. So I just think that engagement is, discernment is a big part of it. And academics aren't always good at figuring that stuff out. So that's the only thing I'd like to say.
Great. Thanks. I think that point about really paying attention to what the needs are out there in the province, whether they're industry partners, community partners, and responding to that versus, I think, because you're saying, versus going in and saying, this is what we want to do, which we often do. But also maybe working on the discernment piece, I guess, is to out of all of the ideas that might be raised, trying to figure out what the most important ones are. And I think, Boyan, you'll probably talk more about the Thriving Regions process, but I know the Harris Center's certainly worked on trying to work with regions to figure out what the priorities are for research that we might work on together. So both important points. Thank you very much for that. Anyone else like to contribute on what their past experiences in working on community university partnerships in Newfoundland and Labrador and what's worked well?
Yeah, it's Andrew here, if I may, and I'd like to put a plug in for rural medicine and build on the last few comments about really engaging the community through listening. Matter of fact, we with the Office of Distributed Medical Education through the Faculty of Medicine, we just completed what we call our listening and learning tour virtually across the province with the Dean of Medicine as well, Dr. Steele. And so that's extremely important. So to best understand the healthcare needs of our province, and that goes right down to the roots of education and how we address our medical concerns and our medical elements and issues. Obviously, we have unique genetics in this province and certainly a unique approach to medicine. But what we did was go around the province and engaging the community members, those faculty members, staff that are very important in educating our future physicians and our medical staff, et cetera. Because without actually knowing the true needs of these communities, it's difficult to target our approaches to educating and basically designing medical care. So I think the feedback that we got from that was extremely valuable, and it's allowed us to design our approach to medical education, from admissions to designing programs that really truly meet the needs of the people of our province. And you hear the buzzwords nowadays with social accountability, and that's really what it's all about in order to really address those needs. And we really need to understand and get down to the roots and get that feedback from our community. So I think that was a very successful tour that we did just over the last few months, and I think it's gone a long way to help enhance what we're doing with delivery of medical education and in turn healthcare in this province. So just the 2 cents from my perspective in medical education. Thanks.
Great. I love the listening and learning tour idea. So it sounds like you concur with those being important lessons. Great.
Absolutely.
Thanks so much. And Joan has, I think, to Boyan's point, added when researchers / academics actually live in the community, they learn to speak the language of the community. They learn what the community is talking about and learn to engage with them and answer the questions that matter to them. That's a great point, Joni, and you mentioned about Brennan, for example, who's on the line, who has lived and worked in a number of the communities around the province. So, of course, not everybody, people live in particular places, and we want to ensure that we work across the province, not only in the communities where, say, our staff and faculty are living, but we students have moved around the province, and we certainly, I think, for those of us who do live in a particular location, I think it's important to get out and spend time. I guess that's if we can't live there, we can certainly get out and try to spend time in places. I know kind of the parachute idea doesn't go over very well often when people sort of parachute into a region or a community and spend a small amount of time and don't really get the full understanding of the place. So thanks, Joni, for bringing that up. I think it's maybe a tension even that we have to continue to struggle with, that we are located in particular places, but we want to serve and be present across the province, which isn't always easy. Margaret mentions, thanks, Andrew. Do you want to mention the 646 Research Faculty Development Program?
So certainly I can comment on that. What she's referring to is a program designed for rural faculty, rural physicians to become engaged with research across this province. So it's something that's been ongoing now for the last several years and made up of an excellent team of faculty members and staff from the Faculty of Medicine and stretched out across the province. So what it allows, it engages and introduces research in our rural environments and communities. Because what we found is many of the faculty members, many of the physicians in rural environments don't always have the skills or the opportunities to become engaged in research. And really, when you look at the design of healthcare and how we should target management, then that really should be driven from research and most up-to-date literature. So what better way to direct that care than to actually have those involved in the care involved in the research that produces it. So with the 6 for 6 program, and I'm a recent participant of that program as well, we've engaged 6 physicians from rural environments across this province and actually a few from beyond this province to basically team up for a year to get together to understand how we can build our research skills so that we can apply them to the health needs of the people in our province, and once again really enhance our ability to deliver that health care with the greatest productivity and efficiency.
Great, thanks for that. I think it's something we struggle with, programs or mechanisms to get to make those connections. So the 6 for 6 program sounds like a great example of that. Thanks for sharing it. Would anyone else like to share some past lessons or experiences with us before we move on to some more current initiatives? See, there's others on the line. Mary, I think you're there. Mary Perez, I don't want to put you on the spot, but I know you did some research as your former position as a postdoctoral fellow on engagement at Memorial and particularly at Grenfell. Is there anything that stood out from your research on engagement experiences that you'd like to share? If you're still there, I should check. Maybe she's gone off to another meeting. I think she may have. Did I hear something?
Kelly, I can jump in just on one thought that comes to mind when we're talking about, what works. There's always a need to ensure there's support for these activities. I mean, it just can't happen on the corners of people's desks.
Yes.
And when you're asking for people's time, it's so important that you acknowledge that and, remunerate people for their time. But so, there's so many layers of support that's necessary. And, I think, and again, the extension service and the discourse around that and the work around that predates me. I'm getting older, but I'm not quite back that far. But it was a long-term permanent commitment in from what I understand. And, now we've moved to a model where, and we know as social scientists, everything is project-based, and that's sort of like everything. When you have a project-based initiative, you end up parachuting in for 4 or 5 years. But then what happens? And, we're supposed to have sustainable plans for our research and engagement work, But how can you sustain plans without sustained support and resources? It can't happen. It's a little easier now, I suppose, with more people embracing virtual. But again, you know, we talk about rural areas in our province, not everyone can access the virtual world either to support these conversations. So huge amount of supports need to be in place in order to make these, in order to reach the goals we have through engagement over the long term, and with, you know, financial and other types of commitments, for sure.
Great. That's a excellent point. And I think back to the Cure, it did have a community coordinator, someone who is based in the community doing that work. And I think Joni made reference to that. So certainly those, the resources, including the human resources that are helping to facilitate those connections in communities as well as in the university are really important. We have, you'll hear about learning hubs, and we're trying to, you know, to staff those essentially in regions as well. But again, challenges in terms of having resources available, but also budget constraints, of course. But very important, the supports have to be there. Another thing that I know people have done is to involve local people and organizations, even as researchers. So as part of the research team versus the model of it always being the university doing the research. So having those sort of investing resources in research capacity in communities. I have another comment here from Tim Perron, who says, good morning, everyone. Tim from ICTC. Rural engagement is a challenge across the Atlantic, and he's always looking for opportunities to engage with youth in high schools with a digital economy mindset and supports post-secondary students. Sounds like a great maybe opportunity for the future we can talk about as we move into discussing the future. Does anyone have anything else they'd like to add, or shall we move on to the current? Rob Thomas, can't show the video at work. I did environmental studies degree at Grenfell in 2006. We did a few local boots on the grounds research. It was much more tangible than something in a book. Great point. Back to the students, that my experience has been that students really value that experience working with real people outside of the classroom on projects related to what they're studying. It also gives them networks and job experience, job relevant experience. So great point, Rob. Thank you from the student perspective about the importance of these kinds of relationships.
Kelly, I just wanted to add to this discussion around, you know, the need for resources. And I think it's more around, you know, especially now in these times of sort of fiscal restraint and, you know, there's just continual cuts in budgets, it seems, then more funding to support these types of collaborations. So I think rather than be looking, you know, thinking about it in terms of resources, it's about how do we find solutions in terms of the, you know, finding, working with a collaboration. So it has to be a collaboration in order to tackle many of these issues and to find solutions that work for communities. Then it has to be, you know, a joint partnership. So the community needs to bring something to the table. And if we're looking at sustainability, then absolutely the community needs to be involved from the ground up. And that can carry on, you know, what the results or the you know, that comes from whether it's a research project or some other type of collaboration with the university. So part of the sustainability has to be that there's someone involved where local knowledge is involved, but local resources are also engaged in the whole process, I think.
Makes sense. Sharing existing resources versus where there may not be additional resources to contribute. Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah, I think the, you know, the problems of today are such that, you know, tackling them, whether it's just the university is not going to work, just the community is not going to work, but I think it has to be, you know, a collaborative effort, looking at who needs to be engaged here and how do we work together to find the best solution. So it has to be a partnership. Collaborative partnerships are critical, I think, as we look at some of those big issues that we're facing in rural communities in particular now. Yes.
Tony says the collective impact approach. I have a comment from Brady to maybe transition us from past to current. Brady mentions talking about the past and Memorial's relationships. It's good to have these conversations to unpack the negative relationships. Good point, Brady, that have planted some mistrust and hesitancy for communities, particularly Indigenous communities who've endured the colonial traditions and foundations of research and engagement from an institutional perspective. Recognizing this past is important to ensure future efforts do not repeat history. So that's a very important point, to continue to look at the negative aspects of our past relationships, and to really examine those and try to change the way we do business in the future.
Yeah, that's a very, very good point, Kelly. And if I might just quickly point out, I think of the Smart Ice project or initiative that is happened as a result of conversations with the communities in Northern Labrador, and that the Smart Ice initiative was created, and that's an ongoing initiative now that is having real impact on a major issue that northern communities are facing. So this is a perfect example, I think, of where that relationship and the way that traditional knowledge, local knowledge, and research knowledge is being combined to address a need, and also addresses this sort of change in relationship and the trust. I think Smart Ice is a perfect example of how that's worked.
It's a great example for sure. Probably most of you have heard of the project, but maybe while we're talking, we can put a link in the chat for everyone if they're interested in learning more about that.
Good idea.
And thanks again, Brady, for raising that. And maybe we can come back to that discussion again in terms of where we go in the future and how we do research and engagement in a respectful and appropriate way, which does lead me into the next section. Mutual respect, mutual contributions, and mutual benefits are core to Memorial's public engagement framework. So these are principles we've been talking about quite a bit already this morning. I'd like to ask our panelists to think about some of their recent or current engagement projects and how they might be reflecting these values to meet the needs and opportunities of the province. Dietra, can I pass it to you to talk about some of your current work?
Sure, and some of this will not come as any surprise to you, Kelly. That will involve you. I just want to go over a little bit of information first for the benefit of folks on the line, and just to bring a municipal perspective to this. So recent statistics from the Government of Canada indicate that municipal governments own 62% of public infrastructure in this country. Of course, we only have, or municipalities only have access to 10 cents on every tax dollar. So in this province, we have significant water and wastewater infrastructure needs, for example, in our communities, in many rural communities, with a price tag, albeit dated, of over $1 billion. So we have communities that continue to experience prolonged boil water advisories. We have wastewater treatment obligations as per the wastewater system effluent regulations that were brought into effect in 2012. And we have an aging infrastructure put in place for the asset management folks on the line. So when asset management, which is basically an approach to infrastructure planning, development, and proactive maintenance over time, when it was not in common discourse. So there's a lot of needs and a lot of issues. So at Municipalities Newfoundland and Labrador, we're deeply enthralled in advocacy supporting innovative and right-sized infrastructure, and to better understanding the kind of infrastructure we have in place and, of course, what we need. So we have a long-standing collaborative relationship with the university, long before even I came to be with MNL, which hasn't been that long, actually. We have a long-standing collaborative relationship with many faculty members and, of course, with the Harris Centre. And this has resulted in a considerable body of work supporting innovative right-sized infrastructure. So, for example, we've been working with you, Kelly, and Dr. Sarah Minnis, as well as with researchers and staff from Nunavut, including Dr. Amy Hudson, on a piece of work on potable water dispensing units, or PUDUs as we call them. And this is an important collaborative piece of work built upon existing relationships that, I think we see them as this idea of mutual respect, mutual contributions, and mutual benefits. And earlier this year, we also engaged in great conversations with Memorial's Civil Engineering Department, led by Dr. Bing Chen, on innovative infrastructure. And what's emerging out of that division as a community sustainable infrastructure initiative. So they also came to a panel that we hosted at our May symposium for our members, and that also included Kieran Hanley of the Newfoundland and Labrador Environmental Industry Association, and Dr. Ashu Dahar, who's also a professor in the civil engineering department. So we're striving to work together for communities and for municipalities to support infrastructure work. And I do think it's very much based upon these principles that we talk about. And, you know, there's so many other examples to which I could refer relating to infrastructure, which my daughter likes to say is all I talk about now, but also to regional economic development, to our work on regionalization, and more recently work to ensuring that municipalities have support for safe and accessible elections in the municipal elections in the fall. Happy to speak a little more on that if you'd like. So, you know, we're finding collaborative solutions, Sheila, to your point. We're working with communities, we're working with our networks, with people with expertise, and we're trying to contribute to not only these practical changes, but also conversational and discursive change and change in policy as well. And I think that's what's so critical to reflect upon. You know, we come to these collaborative tables with a desire to change things and to find solutions. And we come to the table as well with different expertise and the ability to do that. And what I think is special about MNL's relationship with the university and the people in the university, obviously, the faculty, the people who care about working with us out here, and I say that having been in there at one point, is that, you know, what does MNL bring as a community organization to this? And we do a lot of advocacy policy work. We're a conduit for what's happening often inside the university. And I think where we struggle is how do we translate, and we've been talking about it a bit, the work that's happening in academic spheres, translating it to the community to actually make change. And a lot of that change is policy change. And so you need the ability to do that policy work, to do that policy change, and to have the community organizations versed in advocacy to push for those things. And you know, that's such an important connection, and I'm certainly happy to go back to that. But that's also, again, rooted in respect. What are the other two? It's not on the top of my head.
Respect, contributions, mutual respect, mutual contributions, and mutual benefits.
There we go. Yes. And so all of those pieces to get those changes are for sure rooted in those things.
Thanks, Dietra. And as someone who's worked for years now in research collaborations with MNL, I really, in terms of the mutual benefits and contributions, we certainly benefit so much from working with MNL as researchers, and the points about helping with translation, that knowledge translation piece. Certainly think of Gail at our waterworks saying, no, you know, you can't say it that way. Or, and also helping to facilitate those relationships to maximize the impact of the work, like to help set up meetings with the right decision makers, both at the local level and the provincial level, because you're right, policy change has got to be a key piece. And we know that research can help community partners with their policy work. And that's one of the things that they look to us for, but we don't necessarily know how to then turn around and use that research, and it's often not our role anyway to as a lever for policy change, but the collaboration together we can do it. So yeah, thanks for that. Okay, Mildred, I don't think is on the line. So what I will do is wait on I think one of the things she would have spoken about is the hub. So we're gonna park that for a minute. And Brady and Jennifer are also on the line who are involved in that, as well as Sheila. So we'll skip that and move on to Kevin, if you don't mind. Kevin coming back on the line and helping to talk about how you're helping to build new fisheries and respond to some of the changes you talked about in the past with the moratorium and moving into the current and future situation with the fishery.
Thank you, Kelly. I'm actually going to switch gears a little and move away from the fishery. Well, there's connections to the fishery, I guess, and talk about some other aspects of the things we do here. I think this question, if you will, you know, respect, mutual contributions, mutual benefits are key to any relationship. And it's imperative that people feel connected to institutions in society, including education institutions. It's equally true that connectivity is established through engagement, and engagement is successful when long-term relationships are established. I'd like to note that in terms of current realities and tremendous opportunities for the future, I'd just like to highlight an example from here at the School of Ocean Technology, something that's been ongoing that I think has tremendous benefit for the present and the future. And that is the MATE competition. So MATE is Marine Advanced Technology Education. It involves approximately 50 schools at the junior and high school level here in Newfoundland and Labrador. Labrador is always a participant. We've been in the full range of the province from Nain all the way south to the Burin Peninsula. It involves mentoring of usually teachers, don't have to be teachers, can be someone else in the community, workshops. And students are involved from September to I think May, COVID year, didn't happen, but previously, in a process where they would come forward and present and promote some kind of technological advancement and encourage participation in education involving technology. I think that's a critical piece of where we are in Newfoundland and Labrador in the present, and critical to the future for all the reasons we've talked about. So I think it is a really good example. There are many repeats. Many schools participate multiple times, and it really is a good forum for the Marine Institute to engage with communities on an ongoing basis. Thank you.
I love the point about high school students coming up here, because we talked about sort of current Memorial students a bit, but not about future Memorial students as much. And actually, Dietra, in a conversation before this event, asked about some of that. I think the bridging from college into university as well. But I think we can do more probably with our high school students. Certainly, the hubs, which we're about to talk about, we had some high school students who were using the Learning Hub, and I think if we can engage with high school students even more. That would be great for both, for the students and the communities, and for Memorial. So thanks for that great example, Kevin. Maybe Jennifer, if I can ask you to jump in and talk a little bit about the learning hubs, and then Brady or Sheila could add to that if that's okay. I'm sure that Mildred would want to speak about the hub initiative, and Jennifer's been working to coordinate that. So.
Hi, yes, I'm Jennifer Buxton with the Grenfell Campus Office of Engagement, just in case you're wondering why Kelly's asking me to talk. But yeah, I do coordinate the hubs. We had two, they were called e-learning hubs. We've renamed them to digital hubs. We had one in St. George's and one in Port Saunders, and they were co-designed with the communities that we partnered with. And they were meant to be mutually beneficial to the community and to Grenfell, or well, Memorial University, by offering students a place to study during COVID when they were having to study from home. And we also had the added benefit of giving this a community space where community organizations could meet, or we could have researchers attend. We did have researchers attend in Port Saunders for an event. And we could also have them as learning spaces. We had events where they were learning, and we had students that came from Grenfell to Port Saunders, and they learned from the community, and then they also taught the community. So there was a mutual exchange of knowledge there. And so we are expanding that hub project, and we're going to have a bigger one with more locations across Newfoundland and Labrador. And it's really important. Sheila's mentioned this already in the conversation about that really importance of collaboration. And Sheila's been a huge resource and part of the digital hubs process. And it's about that co-designing so you meet those community needs, but also give that benefit to Memorial University by having space for students. We could connect with high schools or researchers, a space to also go and connect as well. So yeah, we really love the hubs project. And Mildred was one of our partners in Port Saunders. And so it was really great to have those community partners, and you really need those community brokers that can help connect you to other community partners. So that's kind of what I wanted to say about that. But yeah, there'll be more information coming very soon about the bigger hubs project.
Thanks, Jennifer. As you say, it's still evolving, so ideas from anyone would be welcome. Yes. Brady or Sheila, do you want to add anything to what Jennifer said on that initiative?
Yeah, if I just might make a quick comment. I think for rural communities, and I mean, most of my colleagues kind of are probably sick of hearing this mantra from me, but I've always said the further away you are from the university, the further away you are from the university, meaning the more the disconnect, I think. And for regions, communities that are, close proximity to a campus, that obviously they have a much stronger relationship. So I think this digital hub initiative enables Memorial to have more presence in the communities. It may be presence in communities that they don't currently have a strong presence. I think it also provides the opportunity. It opens up the university. And I think if we've learned anything in this COVID situation, we've certainly seen how virtually, we're able to open the opportunities to the broader audience of the province, I think, and able to. So I think this digital hub initiative has huge opportunity for not only the community, certainly the university as well. And I'm happy to be a part of it because I have made much of my career trying to share the knowledge about the importance of digital technologies for working and living in places like rural and northern Newfoundland and Labrador.
Thanks so much, Sheila. Brady, is there anything you'd like to add, or we covered it?
I think it's been covered.
Okay, great. Anyone else have any current initiatives going on that tell us something about our relationships and our mutual respect, mutual contributions, and mutual benefits, and how we might pursue those values? Joni has a comment. Sorry, go ahead, Joni.
I always have something to say, and I'll try to talk slowly, but it is evident to me about the mutual respect. It's very evident around this table, and also you see it in the long-term relationships that do exist because you don't stay connected to people that you don't respect. So I think that's very evident. The contributions that the community brings and the benefits that we get, what we contribute, I think, is these also these community broker people, these connectors who can connect you with anybody that you need, whether you need your tire changed or you need to talk to the doctor. These community brokers can connect you and give you access to those community resources, which lets you realize the rich resources and assets that are there. So that helps build the local networks and relationships. And in terms of sort of community-based research, which is the level I like to be at, I heard someone say once that politicians listen to community people, they don't necessarily listen to academics. So if you want to get your message out and influence policies, then you go through the community, and they can get your message out in their own stories and their own words, and that can be very powerful. So that's some of the things the community brings. The benefits is access to the smart people, like the brilliant minds that are out there, and the passion that they bring. They have these skills. I think, like they know Excel spreadsheets, they know how to take notes at meetings. Those are such valuable skills for community people who don't actually have that access, and it really builds that community. It builds the resilience in the community to have access to those skills and to be able to learn how to use those valuable tools that academics use to answer questions. Even how you think about asking and answering questions, that's something I think that the community learns from the university. And the other advantage that the universities bring is the incredible networks of people all over the world. So a small community can end up having their story told somewhere all over the world, or through academic journals. Like, who knew? My name is written on articles now. So it opens up whole new worlds, and then you realize all the layers and networks that exist there. And it's just an incredibly rich resource. So we do get a lot out of working with universities. That's why we do it for free.
Good. Well, you're one of those community connectors that we rely on as well. So thank you for that. I think, Andrew, did you have something to say before? I think I saw you flashing on for a minute.
Yeah,
Not
quick enough on the draw. Yeah, thanks though for that. I wanted to make a few points about some of the things that have been made thus far with regards to how it's reflective in the medical world, medical education as well. And I know it goes back to even what Kevin had mentioned about engaging the high school students and how important that is to, be successful in succession planning and ensuring that we still have these healthcare workers in our rural environments. So with the Faculty of Medicine and with Memorial University, certainly, the MedQuest program has been very engaging and of high school students to get them interested early on in the health field, so that we're establishing and we're stimulating that interest, so that we can take that and then ensure that we have robust workforces in the health environments as years go by. But again, another example really of how we're doing that in the communities is early on in medical training in our MD program. We have opportunities for our medical students to go into the community. They spend a couple of weeks in rural, remote areas with indigenous populations, etc. And the emphasis on that is not as much about the medicine at that early stage, but more to what's happening in the community. How can the community engage with the medical staff and the medical field to, even act as, say, a recruitment effort or retention for that matter. But they reach out. One of the things they do is they go to the high schools and they sit with all the high school students and they talk about, the world of medicine and how they can become engaged. So that does stimulate a lot of interest. And we've had great success stories from those types of projects. So I think that's an excellent example of those mutual relationships work really well. And I'll expand to say that, we've developed partnerships with our regional health authorities, with Memorial University and Faculty of Medicine as well, to ensure that things like student housing is excellent, so that the experiences that our medical trainees have when they go to these rural communities, is not only about the medicine, but it's about the comfort that they have when they're there. And we have the opportunity to engage other learners from other health fields, from other levels of training, so that they feel a welcome part of the team, so that they're more likely to go back. So again, establishing that respect and that and those relationships. And I will highlight one project, because I think we're talking about what kind of innovative ideas are ongoing right now in projects. So, and we talk about hub and spoke model. I will use. Certainly, we're looking at engaging with some community partners and members across this province with the Faculty of Medicine to look at how we can utilize simulation in enhancing our training to help better the skills of our faculty members, our students, etc. And, I think, you look at, there was mention about the further away you are from the university, the further away you are. So we're trying to overcome that obstacle by bringing some of what's worked so well at the main campus in the university to other locations across the province, and then fan out, and like I said, this hub and spoke model, so that we are reaching everyone. So geography is no longer going to be a challenge, so that we'll have the means that everyone in the main campus and around the St. John's area certainly has in those rural environments as well, so that they don't feel disadvantaged. And that's a big part of enhancing that care across the province. And because I know a lot of people feel that a lot of the medicine that they need needs to happen in bigger centers, but that may not necessarily be the case if we're able to engage some of these partners and enhance how we train and how we teach our medical trainees and our physicians, nurses, allied health workers, etc. And the longitudinal opportunities for our students, our residents, our other learners, to allow them to stay in smaller communities for longer periods of time, as opposed to just a few weeks at a time. So, the studies have shown, the research has shown that if you're spending a lot of time in a smaller community, you become more engaged in that community, become more interested in it, and you're much more likely to go back there. So we are working on those initiatives as well. We've had great success with family medicine in particular, where we've trained our family doctors of tomorrow who have gone out for a year or 2 years in some of these rural environments, and they've stayed because of the great experiences they've had. So now we're looking at how we can engage more junior learners to spend longer periods of time in these smaller environments to achieve the same sorts of benefits. So just some examples of what we're doing in the Faculty of Medicine that builds off some of the other themes that others have spoken to.
Great. Again, that point of the importance of having people in community and spending time there. And Margaret also mentioned the Faculty of Medicine has a program for Indigenous high school students to expose them to health professions called the Healers of Tomorrow Gathering, and there's a link there. And I mentioned the Bounce Lab hacking health events for high school students in Grand Falls. Again, just some great examples of what's happening there. Sheila, do you want to speak?
Yeah, if I could quickly add to both Joni and Andrew talk about the importance of local networks, and it's made me think of, I also think it's important for us to, if I could use the analogy of a bubble in this day and age, but, if we stay within our rural bubbles, then we tend not to kind of truly understand, because I absolutely agree the importance of local networks. But I also think it's important for us to kind of view and think about where we sit in terms of national networks and international networks. And I want to share with the audience an example of one of the things that I'm engaged with. Part of my work with Memorial is I'm involved with a network called the University of the Arctic. And despite the fact that it's called a university, it's actually a network of post-secondary institutions and research institutes that are working in the Arctic or working with or on issues pertaining to the Arctic. And the University of the Arctic has been around since the mid-1990s, and Memorial has been engaged in this network since 2004 and has been heavily engaged. We have leadership at Memorial who's involved at the leadership level of UArctic. We have faculty members that are engaged. We have numerous students that have been involved in a number of UArctic related activities. UArctic offers its membership, and it has approximately 250 members right now, and it does activities around student and faculty mobility, but also thematic networks, which are collaborations of researchers at its member institutions. And recently, Memorial is been engaged and partnering with Yukon University for implementation of a major Canadian funded initiative through Canada's Arctic and Northern Policy Framework. So for the next 4 years, Memorial will be leading an initiative that will have supports for additional collaborations within Canada, but also across UArctic's network. So there will be funds to support a project call. And in addition to the point that several folks have made this morning around the importance of youth, through Kim Ship and her team at the Geo Center, there's funding in this Canadian fund to support youth climate change chapters across the province, also in Labrador, and there will be work with at least 1 or 2 at a national and international level as well. So there's some fantastic activities happening, but again, it's because of the work that's probably happening locally, but it's on a national and international level. And I think Memorial's done a great job in being demonstrating and sharing its leadership ability in the Arctic and northern regions in particular.
Thanks, Sheila. Yes, and we certainly heard about the importance of both the provincial networks and also the ability to connect our rural communities with others in other locales and learn lessons and share. And I think those networks can help with that for sure. Let's look forward to the future now. We're a few minutes behind, but we're having some great conversation. And certainly we've talked a bit about where we should be going. As we look forward, we are seeing significant challenges ahead for rural Newfoundland and Labrador. What is one suggestion, idea, or quality that could help us work together to create a positive impact on the future of rural Newfoundland and Labrador? Pass it over to Boyan.
Sure. I've been waiting for this. So I'm thinking about the Harris Center program that we run here called Thriving Regions Partnership Process, and it kind of encapsulates almost everything we talked about. It grew out of our regional workshops and applied research fund programming, but it recognized Sean Markey, a geographer at Simon Fraser University, has this great line that for a long time we used rural communities like an ATM machine. We just took out and took out and took out of it, and it's now time to start putting something back. And we recognized that, especially with the dissolution of regional economic development boards, it was very difficult for communities to actually have a forum to get together and determine what their engagement priorities are, what their development priorities are. So we have restructured what we do in order to I'll give them that space. So that first workshop, instead of having a single workshop in a region, we have 4 workshops over a period of year, and we also bring some research funding to allow researchers to work with communities on their own priorities. But that first workshop is really important because it allows communities to have a conversation with themselves and figure out what their priorities are. So in terms of what are some of the challenges and what are the things that we can do about it that we learned through this process, and I see Diane Hodgebert is here. We had excellent actually series of workshops in Baccalaureate Trail, and she is one of those people that none of this work would not be possible if we didn't have somebody like her who can really connect us to the entire region. One of the things that we learned very quickly is that there are things that we as university can help with, and there are things that we as university actually cannot do. So we know that capacity in many of our rural communities to engage and to work on projects has been eroded significantly. That's something that we as university can help with. We can, rural hubs are a brilliant idea because they do build on that sense of MUN Extension that had physical presence in communities. So just by creating that kind of presence, we are already helping communities to build and increase the capacity to engage with us, but also more importantly, to engage with each other. We are also finding out, and there is not much that we can do about it, is that lack of local media is significantly hampering the ability of the regions to talk to each other. They simply have no way of finding out what's happening. Facebook helps, but it's not a substitute for a local radio station or a local paper. That's something that at some point, not just in Newfoundland and Labrador, but across the country, we will need to grapple with somehow. One of the opportunities that I certainly see for Memorial in Newfoundland and Labrador is much deeper engagement, not just in terms of regional development, but also in terms of building civic capacity to help organizations and residents to be better at figuring out how they work together. MNL has always been a great partner to us in developing that kind of programming, and we are certainly looking forward to doing more of it. And I think that university has been doing a really good job, especially in Marine Institute, in terms of providing very practical opportunities and education for people who are involved in some of the core industries. I think we can do more of it, and I think that rural hubs may provide an opportunity to do more of it. So those are two sort of things. We need to recognize what is that we can actually help with. We need to recognize the capacity that we need to build in the communities, and we have to figure out how we support faculty and students on more than a project money to engage long term, because right now almost everything we do is on annual funding, or if we are lucky, it's 3-year funding or 4-year funding. If you're super lucky as a faculty member, you have a shared partnership grant which gives you 7 years of funding, which sounds just absolute heaven from this side of the university in administration, where we never get 7-year funding, with maybe exception of the RBC outreach and research in drinking water, which now it's gone, but it's the project that enabled Kelly to do that initial work that now continues, because it was the catalyst to actually create a group of researchers interested in rural drinking water and able to do some baseline work that now enables work that can continue. We need more of that, and we need to figure out how to strategically put that kind of funding in place in those areas that really make a difference to our rural communities. I'll stop there.
Thanks, Boyan. Great points. One of the initiatives we're working on is called Phi Lab, which is a project on philanthropy and its impacts in Atlantic Canada and across the country. I think how to get more investment from various sources into some of this work is certainly something we need to keep talking about. And also the points on media really resonated. I can see on the chat, Dietra just adds that it's a great point about the loss of local media and its impact. And Joan talks about community radio stations and their importance. And we have a new PhD program, Transdisciplinary Sustainability, that requires community university partnerships as part of the degree. And one of our students, Fred Campbell, who some of you will know, who from back in Extension days and beyond, is studying communications. And one of the things we've been thinking about doing is a survey of our rural communities and how people communicate, because it's not, and there was some new rural economy research, Dietra was involved, I think, in that, and myself and maybe Boyan, where they studied communication in different communities, and it's different. Some communities use community radio, some use bulletin boards and post offices, some use, I don't know, Facebook more. So we need to do a better job of communicating, I think, and understanding how people communicate in these communities. And there's also a comment, just thanks to the Harris Center, from Diane. You mentioned saying that it's a great partnership and we can't do any of this alone. Thriving Regions is a great example. So thanks to Boyan and Chris for their support. Okay, I'm going to pass it over to Andrew for some final comments from the panel, and then we'll open it up. We'll hopefully have a few minutes for others who would like to pitch in on their good ideas, their one idea, suggestion, or quality that can help us work together more positively into the future. So Andrew.
All right, thanks, Kelly. Yeah, I just wanted to make a point to Dietra's comment about the pilot. Yeah, so being in a close community at Twillingate, enjoyed reading that growing up, and certainly having the Islands page dedicated to Twillingate Fogo Change Islands area. Very, very exciting to read that once a week paper, but really was engaging in the community. Everybody always spoke about it. And even back in the days of Twillingate Sun, before my time, when we had our own newspaper, but again, very, very popular means by which communication was certainly enhanced, right? And yes, we've lost those connections. Unfortunately, we do have to work hard to get some of those very similar things back. But I mean, no, this is a very, very important topic, very excellent question that you've posed here. And indeed, we're facing challenges within this province, and many of which will become more intricate in the near future. And healthcare is one of those big challenges. And as our population ages, we're experiencing an increase in disease burden and complexity. So in order to sustain health and well-being, we will need to respond similarly with increased efforts to recruit and retain healthcare providers, including physicians, other health care workers as well, obviously. So, while Memorial University works to educate and train our physicians, nurses, allied healthcare workers, and so on of tomorrow, we hope to produce a pipeline of opportunity to ensure our supply meets or exceeds demand. So targeting medical training that reflects the needs of our rural populations is the ultimate objective. And I spoke about this earlier, and this is the goal of social accountability, and it can be achieved through innovative work that includes input and collaboration from diverse groups and stakeholders, including those of Memorial University, the provincial and federal governments, and the people and communities of this province, most importantly. So Newfoundland and Labrador has a unique genetic makeup, and I briefly alluded to this in one of the responses earlier. And although this genetic uniqueness may lead to a high degree and volume of disease, it can also be used as an opportunity to provide optimal screening approaches, preventative care measures, and treatment to our people through research, community engagement, and education. Memorial University and this province have established robust genetics and research programs that, with further development and rural expansion, which we are working on every day, it can lead to better understanding of local disease and pathology to develop targeted care. So armed with this information, as our medical learners navigate through health sciences training, our healthcare workforce of tomorrow will be better prepared to be more efficient and effective providers of our people and families. So expanding training opportunities that include increased rural exposure for our students will assist immensely in achieving these goals. And I alluded to some of the longitudinal exposures that we're developing now over the last little while, and certainly will be looking at expanding over the next few months and years. So the Office of Distributed Medical Education, which is where I'm sitting, is doing just that. So we're working together with our educators, our community leaders, policymakers, and people of the community to enhance rural medical training to meet the goals of our social accountability mandate. So, this theme also carries over to the efforts that the provincial government and the health accord initiatives are undertaking. You're well aware, I would imagine, of the NL Health Accord and how Memorial University is a key stakeholder in these efforts, and as are various other groups and people across the province. But by combining evidence, best practices, experience, and community opinion in a combined effort to improve healthcare delivery within this province, we are poised to improve the health of the people living in it. So through these types of partnerships and engagements, we are advancing the health of our people, our families, and our communities for decades and generations to come. And I'll stop there. I know we're running a little short on time, so happy to end and welcome any feedback. Thank you.
Thanks for that. I think the importance of, responsive programming is coming up as well. It's really in part of your listening and learning and evolving our educational programming to meet the needs of the communities is really an important point. We're working on a new program, Sustainable Rural Communities program at Grenfell, and we're really hoping to get out and talk to people about what they would like to see included in those programs. And I think that's a point you're making. It's the importance of being responsive and continuing to listen and evolve programming. That's great. Joni was going to add something on the research collective, and I see Brennan has also, Lowry, who's involved in that, as Joni mentioned, has posted some information on that in the Northern Peninsula Research Collective. But maybe, Joni, if you don't mind, I could just ask if anyone else who hasn't spoken wants to share their great idea, shouldn't put you on the spot, their idea about moving forward into the future with our community university relationships, or any other reflections. Just if anyone wants to jump in for a minute before I pass it back to Joni. Anyone like to add to anything that's been said by Boyan or Andrew so far? Maybe what I'll do is I'll pass it over to Joni. And if anyone wants to say something, I'm not sure. I think you can raise your hands, but I can't see all the boxes. So maybe if you would like to add a point, please just put it in the chat, and I'll pass it over to Joni in the meantime.
Thanks, Kelly. She talks as fast as an auctioneer, doesn't she?
Yes, I'm sorry. I know that the OPE folks have been politely asking the panelists to speak slowly. They're probably speaking to me.
That's right. I'm glad I'm not the fastest talker. But I think two things, the challenges, it's time to tell a new rural story, because that's what we're telling here on the ground. Yes, there are challenges. Where did you want to be in a pandemic? Rural Newfoundland. Which had the best summer in a season? Rural Newfoundland. There are challenges, yes, there are, but we have incredible wealth of assets, which you realize when you live here. And we are actually building on those right now with this Community Place project. The Great Northern Peninsula Community Place project in Port au Choix is an incredible project that's going to meet health needs, but it can also meet fieldwork needs. We'd love to have MUN Extension. We'd love to have people come and stay and live there in the apartment and study what's happening in the center. And already in support of this, talk about responsiveness. I talked about this project to a nurse educator that I knew. Next thing I know, we have the Great Northern Peninsula Research Collective formed, which is my favorite meeting of all time to go to once a month and hear all the ideas, and the amount of research and projects and connections that have already come out of that research collective that's only existed for 2 years, I think, is incredible. So creating these research collective models around these community place models, these little hubs, these multi-use centers that are really grounded in community. And if you can get it in a heritage building with a community radio station, you have gold. That's my idea for the future.
Great, thanks, Jen. I think it's a really interesting model, the Northern Peninsula Research Collective, for other areas potentially too, to kind of create something that has long-term life and looks at ongoing collaborations with the university. Isn't just coming from the university, but is more of a collective. That's a great example. I think there's a story on the collective in the Gazette, or I don't know if Brennan or I think there's been a story written on the collective that maybe we could share with people, a link with people as well, if so. Great, and Kelly Greenfield is suggesting that people check out the first edition of the Tandem, Public Engagement News and Ideas from Memorial University, and Boyan has also posted a link from Ryerson of a media project that might be of interest to folks. Anyone else have any comments or questions to add?
Kelly, I would just like to, not to rehash the conversation about the digital hubs, but I really think digital hubs is an excellent concept and approach to, like, that can have real impact on rural communities and their connection with the university. I think they open up opportunities for expanding on community learning. You know, it provides space and a platform for the connecting expertise to the community for research and for learning, but it also opens up, you know, the whole range of activities that take place at the university every single day that communities think there's no access to it. But I think these provide spaces for people at the community level to come together, and the power of bringing people together. I mean, we've heard that throughout everyone's comments today, and certainly those that Joni just talked about with the research collective. I think that's a fantastic idea, and has some possibilities that of types of programming that can happen at these digital hubs. So I just wanted to make that point again about the opportunity there.
Great.
And if I may jump in, really agree with everything that Sheila said. And just as importantly, digital hubs would allow us to have access to, sorry, Diane, to pick on you, but to have access to that connector like Diane Hodgebird in many other communities that right now we are struggling to find that person because we don't have a presence there.
Mm-hmm. And I like Andrew's point about this hubs and spokes, because there won't be a hub in every community. So we also have to make sure that we reach out from those hubs. So I thought that was a really good point too, to keep in mind as we further develop the hub idea. We have hands up from Brennan and Dietra. So maybe I could pass it over to Brennan. We haven't heard from you yet.
Sure. Hi, everyone. It's been a great discussion today. I just wanted to maybe throw out a bit of a challenge and maybe a solution, thinking about the Green Report and the sort of arguments you hear about fiscal austerity. One thing that I think we haven't talked about in terms of university community engagement is its potential for fueling immigration. So I really would love to see some research on how, by building strong relationships between the university and rural communities, that could be a way to encourage students and other newcomers to the province to put down roots in communities. So, apart from all of the intrinsic reasons that university community engagement is important, I wonder if that could be a bit of an argument to make as to its importance for the province's kind of demographic future.
Great point, Brennan. Thank you for that. Dietra, we have maybe we'll close with you speaking about your ideas or suggestions for the future, and then we'll pass it back to Rebecca. We're getting close on time, but it's been a wonderful discussion. So, Dietra.
Well, thanks so much. I think, just a couple of key points. Reach out to us at MNL. We do a lot of work with municipalities throughout the province. We are a conduit, they are a conduit to all the things we're talking about here. And we need to be connecting with them. They need to be connecting with us and with you. Support the advocacy work that's happening, that we do, to the point on digital hubs. Back to broadband, we need advocacy for the last mile. We need to support that. Municipalities are asking for it. I've talked a lot about other things. It's important to collaborate with other institutions in rural areas. One institution can't be everything to everyone. It has to be, layered out. And also, we need to support, in particular, municipalities as future places of work for young people. They need to envision themselves there working in the rural community, but also in the municipality. And my final note is, one way to engage is to run for municipal government and support governance in rural communities through municipalities. So please consider September 28th. You can still get nominated in your community to run for your municipal government. Thanks so much for letting me have the last word. I appreciate it.
Thanks, Dietra, and thanks to all our panelists. It's just been an excellent, exciting discussion, and several people have commented on that as they've left. And I think it's an ongoing discussion that we'll continue, no doubt, to have and need to continue to have. So thank you for having me here as your host, and I'm going to pass it back to Rebecca to wrap up.
Great. Thank you, Kelly. And of course, mostly what I want to do is say thank you again, both to our great panelists who are located across the province, and also to our wonderful host, Kelly, for really keeping the discussion moving in interesting directions. Thank you so much for that. I wanted to draw people's attention to the surveymonkey.com survey that's in the link in the chat. We do use the information that we gain from those surveys to help us plan our future events. So if there's a theme in particular that you would like to see us cover, please fill that out and let us know. You can always learn more about public engagement at Memorial by visiting www.mun.ca/engagement. And all I have to say beyond that is thanks again, stay well, and yeah, great panel. Thank you so much. Bye-bye, folks.
Bye, everyone.